You're one of the people that I've met and become friends with that I think that just has such an interesting story and just outlook on life. I mean, tell these people what you're doing.
Currently I work as an independent contractor for the film industry. Right now, I'm working for Marvel Studios on the upcoming Blade reboot. Now that Disney Marvel has the rights to that, and kind of what I do is the location management slash coordinating side of things. I work under the supervising location manager and the location manager, and going out finding locations, and then logistically getting them prepped for actual filming in the physical world. I basically do all the deals and get the company what they need when they're actually out in the real world. And that's kind of where I'm at. I leave for Cleveland, Ohio tomorrow. We're going to be filming quite a bit up there in the coming months.
You don't get the recognition sometimes that I think you guys deserve because man, like I know you go out there and you bust your ass, man. Like the hours that you put in, like we've talked about it before. But I
Yeah,
definitely feel like there's a lot of people that's behind the set that you never get to see like in the actual film that just make that movie work and they make it go smooth. And all we ever hear about is the actors, but do you feel the same? Do you feel like there's a lot of you guys that just kill yourselves for these movies?
yeah. I mean, we definitely put in the work and we put in the hours. Definitely, when I was starting out in my career, it was tough, but I've gotten to a point where on the management side of things, I don't always put in the long hours, but the responsibility weighs heavy. We like, for instance, up here in Cleveland, we're going to be shutting down roads, closing down businesses.
I'm familiar with management, and it's like there's so much responsibility that falls on management. And in that industry, like it's up to you to go out, hunt down these locations, and make sure it's the right location to make sure that this film works. And like the way that transitions, and if you think about it, like that location, it makes the movie work, which, like signifies whether or not the movie is successful. And then that turns into money and it turns into theaters and just tickets bought. And it's like, it's really cool. Like if you think about like just that whole pyramid and just how every little piece is important to whether or not a film is successful or not. And like you guys, like, you definitely play a part in that, but it'd be cool like if you guys got some extra credit for that or something in a movie, like just a B-roll, just to throw you
Right.
guys up there. So we go, hey, these guys make it possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's cool, man. What all movies have you worked on?
The favorite of every project that I've worked on would have to be Free State of Jones with Matthew McConaughey, but I've been working for Marvel on and off for a while. I did Loki, She-Hulk, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I worked on Spider-Man Homecoming. I even did the Fantastic Four, the last one that they did. I think that was a Fox property when they had that, and uh, worked on one of the Jack Reacher movies. Those are I guess, some of the bigger ones. My first actual movie, um, doing locations, was The Maze Runner. I think that was close
Maze
to
Runner.
10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think your favorite movie was that you've got to work on so far?
I think it would be Free State of Jones, and
Yeah.
that's I'm doing something similar on this project, but they put me down in one town that really didn't have any experience with filming. I mean, they might have had one or two things, um, and we took over the town. I was dealing with the sheriff and the police department. We shut down two state highways for, I want to say, it was close to a month. It was a lot of work, but I got to know everybody in the town, so that
Yeah.
was very fulfilling and rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, like that's the cool part, right? Like probably going to these towns and just all the people you meet, like locals too, right? Like, cause the locals, I'm sure they welcome you guys because it's pretty cool to have, a big film come in and, use their area to make this magic. Like, is there a particular place that you've met locals that were really cool that really took you in and like did something cool for you guys?
Yeah, so it's funny you bring that up. I did a talk at a film summit last week in a place called or a place that's Cherokee County here in
Yeah.
Georgia. And I we kicked off the night of the film summit. It was me and the sheriff of the county. And we sat up there and cut up and we talked about what we did. We filmed the I just worked on Creed 3 and he allowed us to film inside of the county jail there, and that's the first time they'd ever done it. And
Yeah.
he had a good experience, so now he's let other people do it. And like I've built a relationship with that community. I mean, he even joked about he was deputizing me while we were up
Yeah.
there on stage.
Dang, I don't think he know what he was doing then,
I know.
did he? Giving you
Straight to my head.
extra. Yeah, uh-oh. Oh, we're in trouble now. Uh-oh. Is there any actors or actresses that you've met that's been super cool since you've been on these sets? Like, is there anybody that stands out that just like, you know how it is, man? Like you get to know, and like I know me, like just through wrestling, you have these people that you either have watched or enjoyed their work, and then you meet them and you're just like what a douchebag. Is there anybody that stands out that you've worked with on some of these shows or these movies that like you're like, man, that's pretty cool. Like they're even better of a person than I thought they would be.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, the most recent guy that I worked with was Michael B. Jordan, and I think I was the first person hired on that movie, or my colleague was the first person, but us as scouts were generally hired first. I mean, I was on the movie before Michael was here in Georgia, and I was around him every day because we were scouting all over Georgia, and he was the star of Creed 3, but he was also the director, and that was his first time doing that. And
Yeah,
humble guy, super nice, said hello every day, said hello to all of the film location site reps. A lot of times some of the higher up people would just ignore them. And he would make it a point to take pictures with them and talk to them and, give his time. He is an incredibly hardworking guy too. That was one of the cooler things about working with him. He was constantly training. He was eating right. He was also directing. I mean, and then it's one thing to train for a role and get into shape, but it's a whole nother thing to learn how to box. I mean, and he's
yeah.
he's completely dedicated to that character that he was playing, and he did a hell of a job. I mean, I want to say top of the box office, or it was. I mean, it is rated one of the top films in the Rocky franchise.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, dude. Like that, it's cool to hear that, man. It's cool to hear whenever, because you hear so many stories, especially now with social media. Like you hear so many stories about just the bad side of people, because that's all that people focus on, right? Is,
Right.
if somebody's a horrible person, like what they did wrong, if they're a drug addict, if they're this or if they're that, they beat their wives, or like that's all you hear about on social media. So I like to ask that because it's really cool to hear the good side of people, because there are those out there that are pretty amazing, but for some reason we never hear about those actors in the industry. It's always just about what they've done wrong. So it's
Yeah.
cool you got to experience that. And like I have to ask, just because like I know anybody listening, they're gonna want to ask, like, is there anybody that was difficult for you to work with?
The one that always stands out, because believe it or not, most of these people they're pretty good folk and just normal people at the end of the day. Um, but the one that stands out is, and you might not even know who it is, Casper Van Dien. He was in Starship Troopers. He was the lead in that back in the day, which was a huge movie. But I
Yeah,
did a really small movie with him in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I just remember him being kind of a prima donna and a bit of an asshole,
yeah,
at the end of the day. And I feel like maybe some of the people that aren't quite as famous as they want to be, that kind
yeah.
of comes out in that kind of behavior.
Yeah, yeah, and you see that, like, dude, I see that in the wrestling business too. Like I've been to shows over the last couple of years, and it's like, John Cena and like Dave Batista and The Rock, like there's some of the coolest people ever, and like they treat people great. Whenever I see them, like they're super cool to me. Like, like I'll consider them friends, or like I've spent a lot of time with these people, and they're so cool, and they care about their fan base and all that good stuff. And then you meet somebody, I've met people that are like, 2 years in the industry, and it's like just getting their big break or starting to get their big break, and they think they're the biggest thing on the planet, and they just like ignore people and just treat people like crap. But I'm a firm believer in karma, and a lot of times those people, they don't work out, or like just the industry they're in, it doesn't go the way that they want it to.
Sure.
Yeah, man, it's cool to see you like doing what you love, because I remember whenever we were talking about this, just a long time ago, you actually were in college and you were talking about going to school for this. And then like I just remember that the one call where you're like, yeah, I think it was Atlanta, I think you were going to, for the first deal that you were getting to do, I believe. Was that
Yeah.
right?
Well, the very first movie that I worked on, I interned for free, and I was in New York.
Was that New
and
York?
and then I went down to Louisiana first, and
Oh, okay.
then to Georgia. But yeah, I mean that was probably 10 years ago. I met you before I even started thinking about doing this.
Yeah.
So it
Which is
is.
that's a cool story within itself, man. Because I actually met your dad, I think, before I met you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember, dude. Your dad, like, God, I wish people, hopefully, I'll have him on here one day, because like he's so interesting and like creative, and just like, man, I could talk for hours with your dad, but I'll never forget it. And we'll get into like his pool room, which is super cool. But I met your dad in Cameron. Cameron, that's where I grew up, and there's a tiny little town. Like back in the day, it was a population of probably, a couple hundred people or a little more. And they used to have this antique festival, in downtown Cameron, which ain't but about, half a mile long. And your dad had this car there. It was I can't remember the model, but it was this gangster car, and it had white
Yeah.
walls on it. And dude, it was so dope. And I just remember I was there, and I was looking, I think I was in WCW at the time, and I was just like mesmerized by this car. And I'm walking around, and then your dad walked up, and he's like, yeah, do you like that car? And I was like, dude, this thing's amazing. He's like, yeah, that's mine. And like we started talking about the car. Then he's like, hey, you want to go for a ride in it? Like offer me to go for a ride and stuff. But like that was the first time that I met your dad. And then I ended up meeting you. And that was whenever, like we started becoming friends, and then putting two and two together. And like that ended up being your dad. And then just
Yeah.
seeing the pool room, man, like, dude, your dad had one of the most amazing pool rooms I've ever seen, ever, in Sanford, North Carolina. And like the amount of cars he had in there. Like, how many cars did he have in that place?
I mean, at one time, I think he had 15, and it could have been more. And the car you're talking about, I think it was a 33 Plymouth, and it had a chop top. And I
Yeah.
remember the license plate said Dillinger without the I.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
it was like I think it was black with a really dark purple top.
Yeah, it was had this purplish black tint to it. Like it was, dude, that car was so dope. And I remember like I always wanted to buy it, but I was never in a place to be able to buy it from him.
Yeah.
But dude, his pool room, man, like just your dad, like that era, just that whole gangster era, like your dad, he was such a huge fan of that era, right?
Yeah, he loves it. I mean, he's got the showroom in the back of the pool room, which you can put a car in, and I think he's got his 60 model Cadillac in there now. It's got all the Godfather stuff all over the walls. I mean, like these right here are original wanted posters of John Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde that he gave
Oh,
me,
those are cool. Yeah.
when I moved to Atlanta. He's got all kinds of memorabilia and stuff like that. He loves it.
Yeah, he'd always print me off something, like, I'd go up there, and like he'd always give me a little something, like, which was really cool. Like I got that in some of my memorabilia stuff. But didn't he have like one of the Bonnie and Clyde cars there? Or was that just something that was like
So
made up to look like it? Or was that an original car that they used?
no, he had two uh film use cars. He had the car that Sonny was shot in The Godfather, the first Godfather, when he pulls up to the toll booth,
Oh, okay.
and they get shot up. Like he had that original car that was in that movie, and then he had another car that got shot up in Dillinger with Johnny Depp. I think Johnny Depp's actually the one that was like shooting in the scene
Oh,
and
really?
shot up.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that was a cool part because like that, he had this huge glass for you watching, like in the back of the pool room, it was like this big glass showroom where they had the car in there or cars, whatever you had in there. But it was always cool. It was just like this huge display case for a car. And it was
Yeah,
just to go in and look at that place, like it was so cool, man. And just the way he built it, he had all his little like hidden rooms and like all that. It was cool. It's hard to explain, man. You'd have to see it. But if you're ever in Sanford, North Carolina, like make sure you check it out. Like what is he calling the pool room these days?
yeah, Speakeasy Billiards, and it's I mean, more or less, with I think there was maybe 18 months where it wasn't open at one point. It's been open since 1989.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really cool place. And if you get a chance to ever stop by there, like I suggest doing it just because it's a special place, man. It's a cool place to hang out. Actually, your dad, man, he had something one time and I ended up buying it from him. He had a Tommy gun, rifle from back in that era. And he had it in a like this violin case and everything. And I was like, dude, like you got to sell me that. And I think he had a couple of them, but he ended up, it wasn't an original Tommy gun. I think it was more of a replica, but it shot the same way and it looked the same as one of the original ones. But I ended up buying that from him, man. And that gun, it was
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah. It was so cool that, he was able to let me get that off of him because like, I don't know, it was just coming from your dad, like and just where it was at. And just he sit there and he told me the history about it and like just kind of what it was and what movies like used them. And you get a history lesson anytime you go up to the pool room.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, definitely. Um, Man, when it comes to spirituality, you're one of the deepest people that I talk to, I think, like, and, like, especially in the industry that I work in from, like a recovery standpoint, like, there's a lot of spirituality talk that goes on in it. But man, our conversations, like, you're one of the people that I love to talk about spirituality or, like anything like that. And whenever I went to Australia on the Hulkamania tour, this was back in my bad days too. This is whenever I was, like in a bad place. And, like I didn't think anybody knew about where I was at, but I guess people could see it. And a girl named Cole Marie Turner, she was a wrestler and a model that was on that tour. I guess she could sense something. And then actually Hulk Hogan too, man. Like he turned me on to this book, The Secret, and it's based around the law of attraction. And I just remember coming home and like just talking about that book and reading that book because it did something, man. Like it changed the way that I thought. And I just remember me and you having a conversation about it and kind of introducing you to The Secret. Um, how does that book, whenever you read that book, like what do you think about the whole law of attraction thing? And like what did that book do for you whenever you read it?
Well, I guess first and foremost, it made me a bit more aware of what I was thinking and how I was thinking. When I decided that I wanted to get into this particular industry, feel like it was really a lifeline into motivating me to get there. And uh, it I don't know that I would be where I'm at without it. I mean, I feel like that your thoughts, and even these days, the more that I think about it, your words have so much power. I mean, it's almost like magic. You really have to get things into perspective, and what you put out is what you get back. And the big thing is to not get hung up on the negative thoughts that you have, which I feel like most people are doing these days, especially the way that the media landscape has been and whatnot. It's important to just center yourself think about what you want, and then put the action behind your thoughts to go out and get it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. I just remember it was cool, man, because like I really didn't have nobody that was into that type of stuff. And like I said, I normally never really read anything like that, you know. And then whenever I read that book, there was something special about it that completely changed my mindset on just the way I looked at everything. And I thought it was so cool that whenever I introduced you to it, like you actually took, you know, like you took a little while and you read it and you're like, dude, like that book's cool. Like it did something to me. Like it changed my, you know, the way that I was thinking about stuff because like that it generally, you know, that doesn't happen. Like you normally turn somebody onto a book and go, hey man, like this is a pretty cool book. Like it helped
Yeah.
me out. It helped me out mentally and spiritually and like check it out. And they go, oh, okay. And then they throw that shit in the trash and like that's it. But I thought it was pretty cool that you read it. And like I just remember you, you know, like telling me at one point, you're like, dude, like that book, man, like it really helped me like kind of see the vision of where that I want to go and how to do it and like what I need to do to get to where I need to be. Because it did for me, man. Like the law of attraction, you know, I agree with you. Like, you know, like the way you treat people, the way you talk to people, that negative energy that you put back or you put out there, like what you get in return is going to be negativity or positivity or the way you treat people. But the book goes deep, man, and it completely had a huge part in changing my life. But I thought it was cool because, you know, like since I gave that book to you, like I've given it to a lot of different people. And there's been, you know, like some people that it's really helped and it's really turned on this different path and way of thinking. And, you know, like since then, like that, it made me want to dig in and actually like look at what spirituality was from that standpoint. And like, you know, you too, every time I talk to you, like, you know, we end up talking a little bit about spirituality, just kind of where we're at, some new stuff that we, you know, we've come across. And man, you've did something that's been on my mind for years now. And, you know, I've talked to people about it. You know, me like being in the recovery field, being in recovery myself, like I've talked to my sponsor about it. And that's you know, like the whole ayahuasca experience, spiritual experience, right? And
Sure.
like you went to Peru, is that right? Is that where you went to go
Yeah,
do this?
yeah, in the mountains there in Cusco, right outside of Cusco.
Yeah, because for me, like you know, because I really want my spirituality to be like the best that it could possibly be. And like, you know, like these whole like ayahuasca, you know, trips and these places that you can go and the shaman and they do the whole spiritual experience, you know, in recovery, like old school, you know, AA or NA or, you know, some sponsors, like they look at that and they go, no, like that's a relapse. Like you can't go do that. And, you know, me and my sponsor, like I've talked to my sponsor about it. And, you know, it comes down to motives and all this, but I won't bore you with all, you know, all those conversations. But like it's something that I really feel like could help me like get to that next level spiritually and like I've been interested in it, but I hadn't, you know, ever, you know, made the decision to go do it yet, just because it's such a, you know, like it's such in such a gray area in the recovery field, man. But like, talk a little bit about your ayahuasca experience in Peru and like what that did for you, and just kind of what that was.
Well, I would say initially what started it off is I had that feeling like you just described, like I really think I want to do this, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. You know, I'd heard a little bit about it and read a little bit about it, and then you know I got married in 2017, and I was working at the time, and I said, you know, when I'm done with this job, you know, we'll do a honeymoon then. I'm not going to take off work, and it started being the lineup was really strange in the fact that our honeymoon fell on what was my 30th birthday. And I said, look, I really, you know, I want to go to Peru. And this is the reason I want to do ayahuasca. And my wife was like, oh, you know, I don't want you doing drugs on our honeymoon and all this stuff. And I was said, you don't understand. It's not what it is. It's not drugs. And when I got down there, the people that I did with, because it was a legitimate thing in the Andean mountains with the Peruvian shaman. I mean, it was legit. I mean, we were going up like a goat path to get to this place.
So they
Uh,
took you were up on a mountain? Is that
yeah, I was up at the top of this mountain in this barn, and I thought that I was going to be doing it with a group of people, but I wasn't. I did it by myself. The shaman was there, and I believe he did a little bit, but I was going through it whenever I did it. But the lady that was basically there to watch me and make sure that I didn't freak out or choke or get sick or anything like that. She explained it to me as we don't view this as drugs. We view this as plant medicine. And she said a lot of people that like to do drugs and that like to get high and things like that, they misinterpret what it is, and so they'll go do this. Because that was the intention that they had was, oh, I'm gonna go get high.
yeah.
It crushes them, and I mean, she said that they'll come out completely frightened and scared out of their minds because it shows you who you really are, and which is it just beats your ego into the dirt until you can't take it anymore, and you think it's going to let up, and then it just continues to do it until it shows you what it wants to. And that was what she said, is this is mother ayahuasca is going to show you things about yourself that you probably don't want to know, or you just choose to ignore, and you're not going to be able to fight it, so don't even try. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and a lot of people use it to get off of, heroin. I
That's
know
exactly what she said.
yeah, there's been people, I've seen interviews with people who, went to get off of some sort of drug that they were addicted to, and they did it through these ayahuasca retreats and going and doing this whole spiritual ayahuasca experience. So yeah, so to me it's interesting, man, because like ego deflation is such a big part of, like getting sober and, recovery, whether it's AA or NA, like ego deflation is such a big thing. So it's really cool to think about, like ayahuasca, like that, doing one of these, spiritual experiences. It's about ego deflation. So, like me and my sponsor, like we've talked about it over and over. And my sponsor, he actually supports, like if I was ever to make the decision, but I want to be confident that I do it. And like, like I would want to go to a place like Peru, or, like somewhere that it would be just that special moment and that spiritual experience to the fullest. But yeah, man, like that's such a gray area in recovery. And I've always been scared to pull the plug because I just don't want people looking at me like, oh, you relapsed, or, you're just going and doing drugs again, because that's not the case. I feel
It's
like, it's a
not
total
that.
spiritual thing.
Yeah, it is not an enjoyable experience. So you
What
know,
does
I,
it do? Like you at first, what happens first whenever you like what was the process? Like,
the process is they give you a cup and it's filled with this black liquid, and it's kind of like a licorice taste. And I you drink it, and that's that. And so you're sitting there, and when I drank it, I was just thinking like, man, is anything ever going to happen? And before I knew it, I was flat on my back, just going through it. And you need to bring water because you're going to sweat and you're going to throw up.
yeah,
I threw up for several hours. And I mean, they prefaced it with, you may feel like you're going to die, when you do this. And I don't know if that was an ego death that I was experiencing, but it felt very real. And
yeah,
it came to the point where I was thinking to myself, if I'm going to die, I wish it would go ahead and happen. And
yeah,
but it goes through waves. So it lets up a bit, and you're thinking, oh man, I'm on the other side of it, and then it just pulls you right back down. And
yeah,
it the like she said, whatever mother ayahuasca is trying to show you at that time, she's beating it into your head until you get it. I mean, she it is relentless.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, man. Like, I've listened to Joe Rogan talk about it. I've listened to people on his show that's done it. So it's definitely an interesting experience. So I don't know. One day I might have to venture and try the whole spiritual experience. But like I said, like it's such a gray area in recovery. For
Sure.
me and what people's gonna think about it. But all right, dude. Look, man, I appreciate you coming on. I know we got enough that we could definitely do this again.
Yeah,
Where are you
anytime.
heading this week?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland. All right, man. Well, look, safe travels and go up there, kill it like you always do. And let's catch up again soon.
All right. Thanks, my man. Love you.
All right, love you too, bro.